Welcome back to our discussions on worldviews. So we're talking about worldviews. What about the Christian worldview? And this is the picture I wanted to show you. This is the Christian worldview. We ought to be able to see the world through the scriptures or through the church. We are in an apologetics and evangelism conference. Apologetics and evangelism presuppose full understanding of the Christian worldview. What are we defending for in apologetics? And what are we evangelizing? So if we don't have full understanding, solid knowledge of our Christian theology and Christian faith, not only solid knowledge, but not only solid knowledge, but be able to, the ability to translate and explain and convey that knowledge in a digestible way to the audience, then what are we doing here? You see, it's essential for us in this conference. Apologetics and evangelism presuppose full, solid knowledge of our Christian worldview or our Christian faith. Now, I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to go through the elements of the Christian worldview, and then I want to ask you some questions to help me answer these next slides. What are the elements that we discussed? Remember, last night we said that there are several questions, and they're all, they have to do with past, present, future, where I came from, why am I here, purpose, and where am I going? And then there are very varied questions, and let's go through each one of them, and I want to get your help in answering these questions. Who is God? Now, we're Christians, and we're articulating our Christian worldview. So I want to ask you these questions. Who is God? Yes. Our Savior. Very good. Now, keep in mind, you are talking or you're discussing these questions with most often someone who doesn't believe the same, you see? So use language that could be easily understood. But yes, our Savior. Who is God? Creator. Excellent attribute. Who is God? I'm assuming, remember I said who is God? I could have asked the question, what is God? Because now by saying who is God, I'm assuming that God is a person. Okay, I shouldn't have done that. Actually, I should have changed that to what is God? What is God? Now I give you the answer. A person. Person. Key difference or differentiation between Christian God and all the other man-made gods. Who is God? Anyone else? Father. Right on. What else? Define God and give 3 examples. Someone was asked this question. How can we do that? That's heresy. Yes. Omnipotent. Yes. Omnipotent. All the omnis. Omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient. God is infinite. He is personal. He is sovereign. AKA Pantocrator. Good, holy, transcendent, omniscient, omnipotent. These are the attributes of the God we worship. We ought to be familiar with these attributes because this is the God we worship. God is eternal and self-existent. As Abuna mentioned, He's creator. By nature, He's eternal. He's the uncaused first cause. He is what Aristotle referred to as the unmoved mover. The uncaused first cause, He's self-existent, does not need a cause for His existence. Everyone else and everything else needs a cause for his or its existence, not God. And we can explain as much as we can, I shouldn't say as much as we can, as much as it was revealed to us by God, okay? Because we believe in what's called divine revelation. This is how we get to know God, by what He revealed of Himself to us. God is the only being in existence, the reason for whose existence lies within Himself. God is the only being in existence, the reason for whose existence lies within Himself, unlike everything else and everyone else. Okay. So He's a self-existent God. In Arabic, wajib al-wujud. He exists necessarily. He doesn't depend on something else or someone else for him to exist. You see, that's God. In the Christian worldview, if you want to articulate who he is, this is our God. This is the God we worship. When atheists deny God, they are actually denying a different God than the God we worship. Because if the God of atheism is the true God, I would be the first atheist. You see? Do you see? We're actually talking about two different gods. This is the definition of, or not definition, again I keep saying definitions. This is our understanding of God based on his revelation to us. Richard Dawkins has a book called The God Delusion. Any of you heard of that book? The God Delusion? Now, if you read this book and understand what he means by God, a totally different phenomena, totally different concept of God. He's referring to a created God, a God that was fabricated by man. Can you know God? Another question. Simple answer is yes. Explain. We can relate to him in a personal way, but our God, because he is a person distinguished from all the other man-made gods with a lowercase g, knowing him is more than just knowing he exists. Knowing him is as if you're knowing a person, as you said very beautifully, a father. So knowing him is more of a relational type of knowledge, not only cerebral or mental type of knowledge. You see? So this is how we get to know God. That's the field of, anyone knows what the field of knowledge is? Philosophy? Epistemology. Epistemology. So this is, now we're talking, just so that this is theology and this is epistemology. How do you know what you know? These are categories of worldviews that we need to be familiar with. Theology is the study of the ultimate reality. Epistemology is the study of knowledge. How do you know what you know? The universe. What is this? What is the universe? And this is the Christian worldview. What is it? Where did it come from? And can you explain the universe? Cosmology. So theology, epistemology, cosmology. Any answers? Simple. These are not trick questions. Huh? The created by God. It was created, it was spoken into existence by God. Very important expression. Any of you heard of this before? How do you say that? Ex nihilo, right, Abuna? Latin way, not nihilo. Ex nihilo. You know what that means? Out of nothing. God spoke or created the universe out of nothing. He did not have something to create with. He spoke the world into, or the universe into existence. So we believe that this universe was created by the God we just mentioned, the personal, omnipotent, omniscient, and so on and so forth. Is God part of the universe? That's pantheism. Is God separate completely from the universe? That's deism. Is God separate yet involved? That's theism. That's what we believe in. He's not part of this universe. He's not a particle of the universe or an object in it. He is separate from it, yet involved in it. You see, that's theism. This is what we believe in. Okay. Next, cosmology. So we said theology, epistemology, cosmology. Now we go to anthropology, the nature of man. What is man in the Christian worldview? Come on, help me out, guys. What is man? What did you say? Created of the image and likeness of God. Exactly. The reason why I'm asking these questions, because think or pretend you're asking these questions to a non-Christian, to a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Hindu or an atheist or a naturalist or any of these worldviews we mentioned last night. You will get different answers. So what would be the answer us Christians would have and articulate and convey to the others? What is the nature of man? If you were to ask an atheist the nature of man, what would you get? Collocation of what? An animal, exactly. A higher kind of primate, higher being animal, or whatever you call it. We are created in the image and likeness of God. We are made up of souls and bodies. We have the physical, the material, and the metaphysical, or the immaterial components in us. Image and likeness. The image of God is what we are. The likeness of God is what we ought to be. We grow to become in the likeness of God, but we share with everyone the image of God. We are now, being in God's image, humans are worthy of honor, dignity, and respect. The only Christian, it is in the Christian worldview, will you justify honor, dignity, and respect for human beings. But if I am made up of some molecules and bacteria over time, matter, and chance, then where would I get my honor and respect from? Where is the inherent value and worth that I have? None would give me that other than the Christian worldview. So this is anthropology. Let's look at axiology. You know what axiology is? Morals. Not to be fancy, I just want to, since it's all ologies, I'll finish with ologies. Ethics, morality, axiology. What do we know, or how do we know right from wrong? Morality. Is it relative? Is it socially constructed, culturally constructed? Do we know right from wrong by reason, human reason? Does evolution dictate right from wrong? How do we determine what's right and what's wrong? There exists objective moral laws, but why are they objective? Because they are based on the objective nature of God. Do you see? If there was no God, there would be no what I mean by objective is something that's beyond you and me, that applies for overarching, that applies for all of us. God reveals his perfect moral nature both through his words in the scriptures, like you said, and through his mystical body, which is the church. He reveals these moral laws. We know what's right and what's wrong because God spoke and said what's right and what's wrong. An atheist wouldn't have these answers. One more. Last. What is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? What's the purpose? This could be each one of these, by the way, each of these questions could be a lecture or a conference in and of itself. But I just wanted to very quickly give you the answers for these worldview questions. Help me answer this one. What's the meaning of life? Meaning comes from what? Very important. If you don't have that, your life is meaningless. So who said it? I heard it. Yeah, purpose. Exactly. Somebody said it here again. Purpose. All of you have heard of the purpose-driven life? By Rick Warren, I think, right? The purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. Okay? Purpose gives you meaning. What gives you purpose? See, there are three building blocks. I live my life meaningfully if I have a purpose in life. How do I get this purpose in life? Where do I get it from? From where I came from him who gave me this life, or from it that gave me this life. So origin gives me purpose, purpose gives me meaning. If my origin is natural, evolutionary, then my purpose is defined or determined by evolutionary standards. And if that is the case, then my life will be as meaningful as this purpose because it was defined by my origin. I'll give you an example. I think I may have given you this 3 years ago, but in case some of you weren't here. The purpose of this pen, if it were to speak and talk, this pen is most meaningful when it's used to write with. Now, the purpose of this pen is to write with. Now, if I were to use this pen and open a jar of fruits, what would happen to it? It will break, because the purpose of it is only to write with, not to open jars with. Now, who determined that the purpose of this pen is only to write with? The maker of this pen. We ought to go back to our maker to know what is the purpose for which we were made, so that we can fulfill this purpose, so that we can be living a life of meaning. Do you get it? And this is how this pen becomes meaningful, when it's used to write with. Now, when we deviate from our purpose, our life breaks. Well, how do I know? What's the purpose of life? Well, who made me? And what is the purpose that He instilled in me to fulfill? And that's why you'll get different answers from atheists and believers. What is beyond the grave? Eschatology. The life to come. What is beyond the grave? You ask an atheist. I was speaking to an atheist not long ago, and I asked her, and I said, we talked about Jesus, we talked about life, and the 3 questions of life, where you came from and why you're here, where you're going. So I asked her this simple question: when you die, what's going to happen to you? Yani, not to be too morbid and pessimistic about life, but what's going to happen to you? She paused for a second and she said, I will cease to exist. That's it. I'm done. Finished. I said, are you serious? This is it for you? So the 70, 80, 90 years you have here in this life is all there is? Nothing beyond the grave, nothing to come, nothing to look forward to? How hopeless must you, I didn't say that, but I was thinking it. How hopeless must you feel if this is all there is? Now, atheism is really a philosophy of hopelessness. One time an atheist was Richard Dawkins himself, and I keep referring to him because he's, like I said, he's the not the priest, no. I thought about that last night. Forgive me. Not the priest of atheism, but the leader of atheism, patriarch of atheism. And he was asked, many people in this world will never get justice. They will never see justice in this world with all the injustices around. Are you telling me that this is all there is and they will never realize this justice at one point? He says, yes. He said, yes, that's too bad. But how hopeless is that? So anyways, what's beyond the grave? You're not going to cease to exist. You will live. We believe that there's an afterlife. This afterlife can be spent either in the presence of God forever or in the absence of God forever. The presence of God forever, we call it what? Eternity, i.e. heaven. Thank you. And the absence of God forever, we call it hell. Thank you for saying it. People shy away from saying the word hell, but it's a doctrine that Christ discussed. And I was mentioning to Bishoy as we were driving over here that one day, or maybe one year of the Apologetics conference, Abuna, we can talk about heaven. We can make it a theme. Because if there's one subject that I like to read on and talk about and discuss, and it's the subject of heaven. It's my dearest subject for me. So heaven, yes, we believe in heaven. He is indispensable for having meaning in life, or having the afterlife, and having the understanding of anthropology, theology, and epistemology, and all of these things we mentioned, centered around these answers. All right. The Christian worldview is true. Why? Because it's falsifiable. Another test for truth. What do I mean by falsifiable? Anyone knows what that means? Falsifiable means it can be proven false. You can prove something false if it is, well, let me explain what I mean by that without getting into a lot of theoretical talk. Let's explain what I mean by that. Okay, because it's falsifiable. Let me give you an image. Here it is. How did Christianity start? And those of you who came last year, you saw this image. Any of you, by show of hands, any of you were here last year? Besides Bishoy? Okay. Perfect. Good. So this is new for most of you. How did Christianity start versus all the other religions? And this is why I mean by what I mean by falsifiable. After a public ministry, Christ was killed what? Publicly. Christ rose from a public tomb publicly. Christ publicly showed himself to the public. The public told everyone what they saw. Do you see the common theme? What? It's a public event that occurred in history out of all the 20 minutes I've been discussing. Philosophers and thinkers and seekers of the truth and wisdom, they sought 4 answers to 4 questions throughout history. There are 4 questions and they wanted 4 answers. What is the problem? That's the undesired effect. What's the cause of the problem? That's the undesired cause of the effect. What is the solution? That's the desired effect. What is the way or path to the solution? That is the desired cause to the desired effect. Okay, 4 questions. And you look at all the thinkers throughout history, they struggled with these 4 answers to solve the human condition. Humanity was fallen and marred because they see all the problems in humanity and they wanted to solve it. What's the problem? What's the solution? And why is the problem the problem? What's the path is the solution? All of these things. So let's see how these 4 questions, and by the way, these 4 questions are also in medicine, because we're actually doing some medical analysis, not to the body, but to the soul. In medicine, if you're studying medicine, you will always come up with these 4 questions. What are the symptoms? What's the diagnosis of the disease? What's the prognosis of cure? And what is the treatment plan? Again, what's the problem? What's the cause of the problem? What's the solution? And how do we administer the solution? And what's the way to the solution? 4 simple questions. Every single, in law, in medicine, every discipline, if you do project management, in business, you have these 4 problems. Are we good with that? Let's look at Plato's 4 great truths for these 4 questions. Plato, if you study Plato and his work on the Republic, the problem for Plato was that we are not good. We're filled with vices or vice. Okay? Vice was the symptoms. What's the problem? Why are we not good? Well, his assessment or diagnosis of the problem is that because we're ignorant. Well, how do we fix this? What's the solution? Well, if the problem, the symptoms are that we have vice, then the solution is that we should have instead virtue. So usually the solution is the antithesis or the opposite of the symptom, the problem. What's the solution? Virtue. Well, what's the way to the solution? Knowledge. You gain knowledge, you will become virtuous. And if you are ignorant, you will be filled with vice. That's Plato. This is Plato, by the way. You don't have to study Plato anymore. You've just studied him. Okay? This is Plato. This is Philosophy 101. Let's look at Buddha's 4 noble truths. Okay? What's the problem for Buddhism? Suffering was the problem, and he called it dukkha. These are Buddhist theological terms. I shouldn't say theological, and doctrine. The problem was suffering. Do you all know how Buddhism started? You know, the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, when he left Hinduism, because we only have 8 minutes now, we'll skip it to another time. What's the cause of this suffering? Greed and desire. Tanha. Tanha was the desire that is causing this problem, symptoms. Well, what's the solution for Buddhism? The solution was nirvana. That's what they want. Extinction of the selfish desire. Elimination of all desires. That's Buddhism. You want to go to heaven? Nirvana? Annihilate your desires. Well, what's the way to extinction of these desires? I'm sure many of you heard of the Noble Eightfold Paths of Purification. Any of you heard of that in Buddhism? This is kind of like the Sermon on the Mount for Buddhism. Think right thoughts, have the right intentions, have the right, all of these things. Write this, write that. This is Buddhism. 4 questions, 4 answers. Marxism or socialism. What did Karl Marx say? What's the problem for Marxism? Alienation was the problem. Well, what's the cause? Capitalistic societies were the problem. Were the cause of the problem. Well, what's the solution? A classless society where everyone shares in the wealth of everyone, okay, of the world. Well, the way to the solution is through communism. Do you see? And again, now you studied Karl Marx in 30 seconds, okay? What's Freud's 4 great truths? Psychology. What's the problem for Freud? Neurosis and psychosis, were the symptoms, rather, I should say. Symptoms of the problem. The cause of the problem is that he saw an imbalance and a conflict between the id and the superego. The id wants things that the superego is telling it don't have. Are you familiar with the id, ego, and superego with psychology? Okay, this is what Freud said. The solution is to have a balanced personality. Well, what's the way to the solution? Psychoanalysis. Hence, psychoanalysis becomes almost synonymous with Freudian psychology. Okay, I have to stop here.